on chastity, its value, and how to win it. Chastity is the daughter of temperance and is nourished by it. Conversely, gluttony is the mother of impurity, for overeating burdens the genital organs and inclines to lust. Now, people laugh at this kind of stuff nowadays, but I'm not so sure that they didn't have it right. Okay? So let's just not write off people because they were in the Dark Ages. They weren't in the Dark Ages anymore. They actually thought. They didn't have phones that told them everything. So, anyways, it might sound weird, but I'm not so sure they're not completely right. So, for overeating burdens the genital organs and inclines to lust. Remember, there's that, what's that lady's name? Vagabond, the lady, Vanderbilt. The lady one. Alice von Hildebrand. When she went to one of the, just for those of you who haven't heard it, when she went to one of the seminaries, because she was a pretty sharp lady, and her husband died, and she was famous too. So, but a good Catholic. So she went to one of the seminaries to give a talk. When she walked in the entryway, she saw a whole bunch of snack machines. And so the first thing she said to the person who met her is, "There must be a problem with impurity here." Do you see? She saw just because of snack machines. Did you have snack machines at the seminary you went to?
We had a bar.
What? I'm telling you, it's just become. It's kind of just. It's
where
weird.
were the snack machines?
At the seminary.
Franciscan one?
No, secular seminary. No, Franciscan one's just in house, like the friary. That's where the Franciscan one, where ours was. But no, where he went to she went to just some seminary, like we'll just say Minneapolis. I don't know which one it was, but some secular seminary where you walk in, it's just they treat it like a school. You just got snack machines and people can do what they want. Well, if you have men that aren't disciplined, if you have a Catholic man who's snacking all the time, you have a man who's not disciplined. That's what you have. So if you have a man who's not disciplined in food, what he's saying here is it spills over into other things. And she immediately associated with impurity. Interesting. And think about that in the families. If you're going to let the kids just run around and eat whatever they want, they get to, every time they walk past the refrigerator, they're grabbing something. People think it's crazy when you actually tell them this stuff, like they shouldn't do it. They get mad at you and say you're a nutcase. But no, the thing is the way they live today. That's the nutty thing. Whilst abstinence promotes continence, cope with the source of temptation, and the temptation itself will diminish. Hence, this is why when you talk to young men in the world today, they have no idea what to do. They're so inundated with lustful passions and all the other vices that they don't know what to do. And sometimes they just want to join religious life because they think somehow by fleeing the world, it'll just all go away. And then you tell them, no, you can't come in here with all that stuff. You got to get rid of the stuff and then you can come in here. You can't come in here because you'll just bring all your stuff in here. Do you see? But it is the idea that they don't have the strength out in the world because they have everything at their fingertips. And so because it's at their fingertips, they're never going to be able to have the discipline to say no. If they come into religious life, they just want someone to tell them no, right? But the world won't tell you no for anything, even for mental illness now. It's where a lot of these shooters, there's been a few more of these big shootings that have happened more recently. It's mental illness. And they know it's mental illness. Some guy, I don't know all the details, but I guess there was a shooting just recently, and the guy killed a lot of people. But he's been mentally ill, and everybody knew it for a really long time, but nobody would help him. And then finally, he just wrote out this letter, like, I'm going to eat breakfast, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to go shoot everybody, and then I'm going to kill myself. And it's just crazy. And everybody knew it was crazy. He should have been getting help. Nobody helped him. So a whole bunch of people had to die. So cope with the source of temptation, and the temptation itself will diminish. Hence, one may lay down as a general rule for all spiritual persons that to be chaste, one must practice temperance. Now think about the temperance. People are immediately going to think about food. It's not temperance with just food. It's temperance with your senses. Because if you're using your eyes to engage in things, even just colors. So those phones, those stupid phones, because they're always beeping and buzzing and spinning around and whatever those phones do, but they have all those nice colors on them, they've got beautiful people on them, things just pop up out of nowhere, there's all kinds of interest, there's curiosity, all these things are feeding the senses. So then you're getting beat down on the inside. So see, they have all these things that they're temperance, that they're not living a completely temperate life, meaning they're not being temperate with all of their senses, not just food. Well, I didn't get a candy bar when I was at the gas station, I'm temperate. Okay, you didn't get a candy bar, but you sat and you looked at your phone, you looked around at everything else, you're watching TV that's on. There's this constant engagement of the senses so that you're being broken down the whole time, and then it affects your chastity. Because what it does is it disrupts the interior man, and that's what leads to it, that agitation. You see? The agitation gets mixed up with the sexual passion, and then the two collide, and there you go. No more chastity. You see? So the practice of temperance. Without it, chastity is never secure, and it is strong or weak, just in proportion to the sobriety observed. Again, temperance. There are some, I know, who think differently and promise themselves security without it. But he laughs best who laughs last. I cannot think that so many holy men who have followed this rule have been victims of self-deception. That is, of temperance. Because you'll have people that they get mad at this message, and I'm dealing with one right now that's mad at this message, because what they'll do is they'll turn it on you and say that all you do is bombard us with all of this stuff that we're not doing, how everybody's going to hell, and all this bad stuff everywhere. And that isn't it. That isn't it. There's a real discipline that has to happen. You can't just pat people on the head and say, yeah, just do your best and try better and kind of do whatever you want to, and everything will just work out. It'll work out. God's good. God's good. You know, when you listen to the Protestant things, because sometimes I have to stay awake in the car when you're driving for 18 hours, and they like to say things like this. They say, God thinks you're awesome. He thinks you're awesome. There's what's the other thing they say? He's fighting for you. God's fighting for you. I'm thinking, God's fighting for me? What does that mean? Where's Front Peel? What does that mean? What does it mean? He's fighting for me.
That probably means that he'll do. I don't know what it means.
What's it mean? God thinks I'm awesome. God thinks I'm awesome. I'm thinking, you know what?
It means stop beating yourself up. That's what it means.
Oh, that's what it means. Okay, all right. Because I'm thinking, God doesn't think I'm awesome, and you know why He doesn't think I'm awesome? Because I'm not awesome. I'm a creature. He's awesome. And someone who's awesome that makes a creature doesn't think the creature's awesome. He knows everything about the creature. There's nothing about him that's awesome. There's also nothing that he's doing to fight for us. If that means he's given us grace, if he's there, but he's there fighting for us. I don't know what that means. It's just kind of sentimental, wishy-washy, jelly donut stuff. Anyways. I cannot think, but anyways, the point is, we can't feel beat up because we have to actually try to live the virtues. You can't feel beat up because you're not doing something properly, and because someone's saying, hey, this would be a good thing to do. And all the spiritual writers always say the same thing. And I'll tell you, I don't think that I'm beating anyone up nearly as much as the spiritual writers do. I mean, St. Paul's like yelling at these people, but they don't read St. Paul, so they don't think he's doing that. They think St. Paul's just like really nice. And he was really nice because he was taking the time to say these things to people. Do you see? I cannot think. Oh, we did that one. Everyone is wise in his own art. I don't know if that's art or heart, but that's Ecclesiasticus 38:35. And those who have devoted themselves to the practical study of the spiritual life are the best guides in matters of this sort. After all, it is the same in mundane affairs. Here the experts are those who devote all their energies to the work of money making or of business management or to similar secular interests, and often so successful as to justify the words that the children of this world are wiser than their generation, than the children of light. Luke 16:8. Now this can be applied when someone's looking for spiritual direction. When you're looking for a guide out in the world, it's difficult today, but here it says the experts are those who devote their energies to making money, business, whatever. Above that, it just says those who devote themselves to the practical study of the spiritual life are best guides in matters of this sort, not the ones that basically engage in all the things of the world. So, what's it mean? The secular priesthood is a holy thing, meaning the priesthood's a holy thing. Not that the secular priesthood necessarily, but the priesthood is a holy thing. But unless the priest that you go to, just because he's a priest, doesn't mean you're going to get good spiritual advice from him. If he's more secular than spiritual, because his state is secular, then you really need to test the waters before you start entrusting your soul to his spiritual care. Not the sacraments. The sacraments he's not going to fail you on, probably. But on the spiritual life, on how to guide you in prayer, you need someone who's devoting themselves to the spiritual life. That's why you have to test the waters to find out, is this priest that I'd like to go to spiritual direction for, does he study and practice the spiritual life more than just saying one rosary every day and getting his breviary said? Someone who's actually engaging in the spiritual life and striving for perfection. Because if not, he's not going to understand you. A man has to go back on what he knows. And if what he knows is the secular life, then he's going to guide you in worldly prudence. And this is what we often hear with religious vocations. People that are discerning out in the world, they're told to do things that you would do to try to find out what college you want to go to. Well, those are good ideas when you're going to a college because that's worldly prudence. But when you're going into religious life, it's a completely different story. Now you're dealing with supernatural prudence. Do you have an individual there in front of you that exercises and tries to steep themselves in the practice of supernatural prudence? Do you see? If not, you're dealing with a secular person who has a sacred duty, but isn't able to function properly according to the spiritual aspects of it because he doesn't know it. And that's very common today. That's not to beat up on priests. It's not to but it is to know that when you go, you have to test the waters and find out. Saint Teresa of Avila talked about it all the time. When you want to find a guide, you have to look for one that's very astute and educated in the spiritual life. They need to know what's what. And I'll tell you, what's more than just learning is practice. If they don't have the practice, they're not going to see what's going on with you. And if they haven't suffered a little bit, they probably haven't gone too far in the spiritual life. You see? But suffering's not the only thing, because if somebody suffers just for the sake of suffering, they're really no better for it in the end. It's only if they know that this is because of the spiritual life, then they should be making great progress. Do you see? Chastity is a virtue brought to earth from heaven. The angels were the first to learn it, and from God himself, the life-giving principle of all virtues, and they have unfailingly preserved it. Christ our Lord, teacher of the angels, has from heaven brought down this virtue to us as our one supreme master, Matthew 23:8. He has taught us this virtue by his own life, and he has set upon a throne of virginal purity to be honored and imitated by all as after him is chief and perfect model his mother, the glorious Virgin. Chastity was a fourfold work, or it has a fourfold work. It cleanses the body, just as impurity defiles it. And where there is no other advantage than this, nor other drawbacks to impurity, well fitted would it be to embrace the former and to shun the latter. Secondly, it eliminates many cares from the mind. It leads a celibate life. To understand it eliminates many cares from the mind. This is the problem. They talk about, someone told it to me on the phone the other day, that marriage is the remedy to concupiscence. I think that's a lie. It might be a remedy to the sin of concupiscence. But because the marital act will keep you engaged in those passions, they're harder to extinguish those passions. Whereas celibacy masters, or should master, the passion. You see, there's a massive difference between the two. Whereas in marriage, if you're still using those faculties, you're going to be thinking on those faculties, right? Maybe not in a perverse way or anything like that, but still they're going to have an effect on you because your body's used to doing that. And so you want to still participate in that kind of thing. Obviously, you have a wife, you have a family. This is what you do. So it orders it, is what it does. The remedy is the ordering of how to use those faculties. Do you see? Whereas in chastity, you have no need for those faculties, so you master them, and then they should have no sway over you. Do you see? And that's why they say you get to walk with the angels. The angels will walk in dignity next to you, because they see that you've had to master something they were given. They were given chastity. And then we're able to, by the grace of God, master chastity. And God wants that. He wants that. So he's going to give that grace. With that prayer, that consistent prayer, he's going to give that grace. That's an infallible prayer. He wants you to have that, you see. To lead a celibate life means that there is no family to be educated and provided for, that the soul runs no risk of being submerged in natural affections for wife and child, of being overshadowed by jealousy, or being overwhelmed by solicitude as to how he may please his wife, 1 Corinthians 7:33, how he may enrich his offspring, son-in-law, mother-in-law. These to him are names merely, and he has no need to ingratiate himself with his wife's relations, but lead a single life void of solicitude, impregnated with peace. That's a beautiful way to put it. Live a life of solicitude, impregnated with peace. You talk to the husbands after a few years of marriage. They're at wit's end, but the wives are too. They're at wit's end. Why? Because they're dealing with somebody who's completely different than them. And it's the only one they got to deal with. Men and women, they react completely differently to things, and they're both at wit's end how to deal with the other one. Right? I mean, the husband's overly objective. The wife needs more, she's a bit more, I don't want to say it wrong, but what is it? Emotional or more affectionate. And so, for the wife, there's an expectation of the affection. For the man, there's an expectation of understanding. That the two just don't go hand in hand. And next thing you know, there's just constant, people start to get mad because they don't understand how to deal with one and the other, right? And that's where the peace comes in marriage, is when they actually can donate themselves enough, meaning be attentive enough to the other to understand what the other's needs are, because it's just difficult for a man to understand how a woman functions that way. It doesn't mean much to the man. That's just sentimental. I don't understand. But then the woman, this is important, and the man doesn't so that it just goes back and forth. Each one trying to understand the other brings peace, because it brings harmony, because there comes that completion of humanity through the two. Do you see? In married life, it will often happen that the many anxieties and cares, even bitterness, that sometimes mark its course, and which the apostle calls the tribulation of the flesh, 1 Corinthians 7:28, will come in time to outweigh completely all its carnal pleasures. Nobody understood what I just said. Because this is nobody understands this when you're in the beginning stages and wanting to get married. You're not thinking about the tribulation of the flesh, which will come in time to outweigh completely all of its carnal pleasures. But the celibate in all these matters is free and unburdened. Celibacy lasts a whole lifetime. For the married, it comes eventually. Does that make any sense? Not for all married, but a lot of times what you find in the marital in the marital relationship is the relationship gets very tense, can be very difficult, and so you'll have a lot of men that realize they're just as celibate as we are, but not by choice. Do you see? Not by choice. We are by choice. So theirs is a burden, and ours is unburdened. Thirdly, chastity fills the soul with joy. To set aside from the love of God the pleasure which the world strains after as of great worth. It is to make an offering most pleasing to God, averting his wrath, inducing his friendship, shielding from sin, meriting reward, and establishing us in our purity of life as followers of our Lord, the fount of all purity. It is a great glory to follow the Lord, Ecclesiasticus 23:38. To follow him who has gone before us in the spotlessness of purity, the virgin son of a virgin, and the spouse of virgins. Finally, chastity makes us objects of love and veneration to men and angels. To men, for all good and bad alike, esteem chastity. Well, you might say they don't esteem chastity today, but you know they do. They'll rip you to shreds because you're chaste, because they wish they weren't slaves to their passions. And that's just it. They're slaves to their passions. So they do esteem it. I mean, some of you have heard this, but I remember being at the hardware store one day trying to pick up some stuff for, I think it's before you all came, and I'm trying to get the friary fixed up. And a Protestant man came up to me and just said, like, if I was a Christian or whatever, I was like, yeah, I'm a friar, I'm consecrated. Why are you dressed that way? I'm consecrated to God. We got vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Just give him the basic spiel about something I thought he might understand. He left and came back and said, so you don't get married? I'm like, no. He seemed offended by it. I wanted to ask him, did you get married? How's that working out for you? I mean, what's wrong with living like Christ? Why is it that Protestants think you have to get married? Christ didn't get married. Do you see? I don't get it. I've never sorted that one out. But he honestly seemed very offended, as though we despised marriage. We don't despise marriage. We don't despise marriage. We just choose something better than marriage, to bind ourselves to God through our vows. The angels became as by nature, two angels, because as by nature, every beast loveth its like. Does that make sense? Because we become chaste, just like all beasts. Remember, angels are created. They were created by God, so they're creatures like we are. They're just spiritual creatures. But the angels, when it says Ecclesiasticus 13:19 that every beast loveth its like, the angels, when they see us chaste and sincerely chaste, not just like putting on the show, but actually being chaste in mind and body, or soul and body, they find likeness in that. They see the spiritual man excelling. Do you see? And that's why they find a likeness in us. So the angels in their perfect chastity are drawn more closely to those on earth who are chaste. As for the acquisition of the virtue of chastity and the maintenance of it and the progress in it, these questions have been sufficiently dealt with in an earlier part of this book. Enough here to enumerate the main points. These ones may remember are discreet aloofness from those of the opposite sex, association by choice with those with those whose life of chastity constitutes a help in itself, avoiding pampering the body with delicacies. Anytime you see luxury written on something, it should be embarrassing to you. You should never. A luxury boutique apartment. I don't know if you can say boutique and luxury at the same time, but you see all those billboards when you're driving down the road of people laying on their face with like rocks on their back and somebody massaging them and them drooling. That's supposed to be attractive in some way. It's just like luxury, sauna, whatever, spa, pamper yourself, all that kind of stuff. Shielding sight, touch and hearing from what may arouse temptation. Shunning idleness. People get off work and they just sit there. Well, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? You see? We don't just sit there. Shunning idleness. A gateway to, and people will be like, well, it just doesn't, we have to relax, okay? We have to take time off. No, you should be busy. You don't have to work all the time, going to your job and making whatever, doing 80 hours a week. But we should be busy. Resting is one thing. Take the rest that you need, but not in idleness. A gateway to every kind of sin against purity, which idleness is. It's a gateway to every kind of sin against purity. Watching the nature of one's thoughts, the thread of one's affections. These are channels the devil would use whereby to inject his poison, because you're relying on the sentiments and the memory, lower faculties in the soul that the devil can access. He can't access the higher faculties. He can't get into your will. Not even if you're possessed can he get into your will. And not into your intellect. Intellect and will he can't get into. But you might not draw a distinction between it. When you have that thought come into your mind, you think, well, he's in my intellect. No. He's in your memory or your sentiments. And those are lower faculties that if you choose to pay attention to them, then it'll be in your intellect. And once it gets into your intellect, because you bring it in there, you can make a choice with your will. There you go. You're going to start getting anxious, worried, all kinds of fear, and then you might even just fall into sin, whatever it is, because you're going to follow that thread that he threw in there. These are the channels the devil would use whereby to inject his poison. Finally, the habit of prayer, the source of divine help in every kind of assault. Do you see? Well, when you're being assaulted in grave temptation, obviously it doesn't feel like prayer is helpful, but that's the whole point. Like your prayer becomes very, very simple at that point. It's just constantly trying to look to God. It's not like you have to be able to be absorbed and not have any thoughts in your head and be sitting there completely wrapped in God. No, you got all these temptations going on, okay? When you're in the middle of a hurricane, your prayer is very, very simple. Save me, Lord. I mean, you're not trying to like act like you're not in a hurricane and pretend that everything's calm and peaceful around you and you're just offering your heart up to God and there's no distractions. No, there's like, buses flying at you and all kinds of stuff. So the point of it is to have a very simple prayer because it's a very effective prayer. When you're in temptations or being inundated with thoughts or those images are flying into your head, you just kind of grip something that is God and just keep crying out the same thing. Because as St. Alphonsus says, if you're praying, you're not sinning. That's the thing to remember. If you're praying, you're not sinning. So the simple prayer would just be the Hail Mary or Mother Help Me, or Dear Lord, Dear Lord, whatever it is. But as long as you're raising your heart and your mind to God in all of its simplicity, then there you are. you're praying. You're not going to be sinning. I don't care how filthy those thoughts are coming into your head. If you don't want that thought, you don't want to engage that thought, and you keep praying, you are not sinning. I don't care what effect it has on you. Do you see? Thought comes in, it affects you even physically somehow. But you're not engaging that, and you're still praying, but it's such an onslaught, but you keep praying and you're not thinking about it, you're not sinning. You're not sinning. You just have to remember that. You're not sinning. Don't let him think he's beating you all the time. He's not. If you can be a complete peace. It's like, I don't care. The body's the body. The soul makes the choice. The body doesn't make the choice. So if your soul stays on target of gripping onto God and you keep praying, no matter what that effect is having on you, you just keep praying, keep your mind up. You stay off of it. There you go. You did not sin. He who prays doesn't sin. St. Alphonse is very clear about it. But you can't be engaging in it and trying to pray at the same time. That's blasphemy. Do you understand the difference? Don't trick yourself with stupid stuff. You have to understand the very simple principle is that you don't consent in any way to these things. But we can become such a target from the devil that we can be flooded with so much impurity into our mind's eye, you have no idea where it even came from. And for anyone who's engaged in that stuff for an extended period of time, which so many young people have today, there's a lot of stuff there that can be just brought back out. It's like vomit coming back up, and you see like the little nuggets of the hot dogs, and you'll see a couple little other things you find in vomit. But because you're hungry, you might want to eat the little hot dog nuggets that are in the vomit and things like that. Well, no, it's still just vomit coming up. So you have to just avoid the vomit. Do you see? It tastes bad, it burns the esophagus, whatever else, but it's not your fault that the whatever reflex stuff, what do they call that vomit stuff that comes up the throat? Anybody?
Acid reflux.
Acid reflux with hot dog nuggets.
You know,